Are you looking for a quick and easy way to whip up a bunch of backgrounds for your cards? All you need is some cardstock, some ink, some masking paper, and a blending tool. Hi everyone, it's Ardith, and in today's video I'll show you how I used these 4 crafty ingredients to make 3 same but different cards with this really versatile background design. And I've got a ton of tips for changing it up too, so stick around to the end to see those. I started with a 4-inch panel of white cardstock lined up on my grid work surface, and I masked off one corner with some 2-inch Post-it tape. You can use any kind of masking material here, but I like this thick tape because I have a tendency to overshoot the 1-inch tape. I blended Tiara ink over the corner using an ergonomic blending brush. These brushes are one of my latest purchases, and wow, are they ever great for getting a lot of ink down quickly over large surfaces. They are a little more costly than smaller brushes, so I only have a few, but they're definitely useful. When I finished with the Tiara ink, I put my panel back on the work surface and I used the other side of the Post-it tape to create a new masked edge. Those grid marks helped to easily measure where I placed the tape so I could do the same on all 4 sides. Next, I blended some party dress ink over that corner, and where it overlapped, I got a beautiful orange blend. That's because these inks are translucent. Back to the grid, and this time a new piece of Post-it tape. It's time to use Fiesta Blue, and that completes my trio of primary colors. As I thought about how to fill in the 4th color, that's when it hit me that I could quickly do 3 of these backgrounds, one each with a secondary color. So this one got limericky between the Fiesta Blue and the Tiara. I kept the colors in rainbow order on all 3 of my panels so I wouldn't get any muddy blends. And another thing about these brushes, they really are easy to hold on to, and it's easy to add or take away pressure because your hand is right up over top. Here's my panel. You can clearly see the 4 original colors as well as the blends that resulted from the overlaps. This makes me happy. Moving on to my next panel, I'll keep it quick because I only made a couple of minor changes. First, I changed the placement of the tape so that it was nearer to the top on one side and closer to the center on the other. Changing these measurements is one way to change the look of the panel. You'll end up with different angles, and that means different amounts of blended areas and unblended areas. This is the panel I added orange twist to, and that went between the tiara and the party dress sides. And here you can see that my party dress got a bit redder because I picked up some of the orange from the paper I'm blending on. Okay, 3rd panel, and this time I really brought that tape closer to the top and bottom right corners. This gave me a very narrow triangle. You can play around with this quite a bit, but you do want one side of the triangle to be longer than the other, or else you won't get any of that pretty overlap. This one has flirty fuchsia on it, between the Fiesta Blue and the party dress. The blend between these 2 colors is my favorite, such a beautiful rich magenta. Because of the placement of the tape, this one resulted in a much larger white space in the center, and I'll need to build that into my design. But before I finished the cards, I used a couple of products to add some interest to these panels. I started with some gloss spray in white. When you shake it up enough, it gives you really opaque white splatters over your panel, and they dry shiny, which is kind of cool. I also splattered some Avery Elle Shimmer Mist over to add a little sparkle. Now for completing the cards, this background was my favorite, so I didn't want to cover it up completely. I chose the top layer of the Floral Star layering set from Birch Press Design, and I glued it to the background with liquid glue just on the more solid areas. I don't mind if I get some extra dimension if the edges lift a little. I put a white circle die cut over that white square in the center of the panel, and I used a stacked up die cut for my sentiment. To add a little interest to the die cut, I coated it with Nouveau Crystal Glaze. This stuff is a little runnier than glossy accents, and maybe even runnier than normal because of the summer heat, and I ended up putting a little too much on top of the die cut. To fix that, I got out my craft pick and I pulled back the excess product from the hole in the O and the E, and I spread it out evenly on the rest of the die cut. I added a pinch of Studio Katia Chunky Sparkle Glitter. This has a great look on black cardstock, and it adds some iridescent color. I finished the card with a couple of midnight black jewels from Pretty Pink Posh, which also have an iridescent finish and help to break up a bit of the white space. For my next card, I used the other background with the smaller white area in the center. This time I used the Interlocked die from Catherine Pooler Designs. This is delicate and airy and really lets the background colors shine through. I created my sentiment by combining two stamp sets. I started with the U from Big Thanks. This has a lovely hand-lettered look, and it's the perfect size for this white circle die cut. Then I added two little words, Are Loved, from Thoughtful Phrases underneath to complete the sentiment. Then I added a butterfly from Happy Butterflies. I die cut it first, and then I stamped it with VersaFine Onyx ink. I tested my placement on a scrap piece of paper and then lined up the stamp in the hole. When I had it where I wanted it, I put the die cut in and I stamped it for real. I'll keep this panel with the 4 butterflies cut out as a template for future projects. I embossed the VersaFine ink with Wanderlust embossing powder, which added a beautiful sparkle to my butterfly. To finish this card, I added 3 little midnight black jewels opposite the butterfly for some balance. My final card had that large white square in the center, so my white circle is also much bigger. This time I used one of the Altenew Snowflake layering cover plate dies, and I trimmed it down to 3 3/4 inches square. I added a few of the diamonds back into the grid pattern just for some interest, and I set it aside to dry. Then I stamped my sentiment from gradient stripes, starting with the big happy word. When you're combining 2 words to make a sentiment, it's often better to stamp them separately so that you can get the 2 words as close as you like, without the extra photopolymer getting in the way. This time I added quite a few more jewels since that white circle was so much bigger. I like to add them to the bottom left and the top right, and I try to keep them in odd numbers in total. So here I put 2 underneath because that word birthday is already underneath the happy word, and then I put 3 up above. I also tend to put my bigger ones lower in each grouping, and I try to make sure they're not on a straight vertical or horizontal line. If my grouping has 3 jewels, I try to be sure that 2 of them are closer together. And if you think this is all sounding very scientific and professional, don't forget that mostly, my embellishment placement is dictated by where my smudges are. I just happened to luck out this time. As promised, I've put together a number of variations on this theme, ways that you can change up the look by just changing the technique slightly. Let's take a quick look. Number 1, you can use a rectangle panel instead of a square, and you can use different colors or even go down to one color for a monochromatic look. These inks get deeper as they layer up, so you can still see where the overlap was, even with one color. Number 2, I used the same measurement on each side in my previous cards, but what if you don't measure at all and just put the tape down in a random place on each side? You'll end up with different angles and triangles and overlap blended areas, and that gives you a wonkier look, which can be really fun. Number 3, mask off the center white portion and blend ink onto that. This can give you more flexibility in the shape of your sentiment panel or the placement. Number 4, blend over the inked areas with a stencil to create more interest. The fact that these inks get darker as you layer them really gives you so much opportunity to get a nice tone-on-tone look. Number 5, or maybe 4A, stamp over the blended areas with the same ink to create a different kind of tone-on-tone look. This panel was really meant to just be an example of all those variations, but I ended up thinking it was really fun in all its lopsided glory. So I added a quick Essentials by Ellen sentiment and I made it into a card. So now on to number 5. Try not having any overlap between the 4 corners. Having a 4x4 inch panel makes this really easy. Just mask off at 2 inches on each side and do the ink blending as before. You end up with a nice, even, clean and simple background with a big white space in the center, which is perfect for number 6, stamping your sentiment right onto the panel. I used a big thank you sentiment from a Jillian Vance design and my mini Misty. Number 7, which is another variation on the stencil or stamping idea. Mask a smaller portion off of each corner and blend more ink. I moved the tape down to 1.5 inches on each side, and I ended up getting a card that makes me feel like I'm channeling Laura Basson. I hope you're inspired to give this technique a try and put your own spin on it. Let me know in the comments below which one was your favorite. And even as I'm telling you this, I'm thinking of other ways you could use it. You could go direct to paper with your ink, or you could use a different medium altogether. All from 4 simple crafting supplies that you have on hand already: ink, paper, blending tool, masking tape. All my supplies are listed in the description below and also on my blog. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.